Hi, today we're talking cells. No, not prison cells. I'm talking about the cells in your body. Now you have millions of cells, but the ones we're focusing on today are your fat cells. Everybody was born with fat cells. I was born with them. Cindy Crawford was born with them. You were born with them. And one thing's for sure, if you were born with 10,000 fat cells, you'll die with the same number of fat cells. We can't ever change the number of fat cells we're born with. So what you have is what you got. You don't have any control over it. But fat cells fill up with fat, and that is something we do have control over. You see, when you eat fat, you are feeding your fat cells. Your fat cells blow up if you eat foods that are high in fat. Picture it like these balloons here. See how these balloons are fully inflated? Well, they look just like the fat cells in an overweight person. So just like these balloons are filled with air, your fat cells are filled with fat. And the more fat you eat, the more your fat cells will keep expanding and expanding. Now here are some balloons that are only half full. These fat cells are probably more like the ones that Cindy Crawford has. There's not much air in these balloons. If you ever see Cindy, there's not much fat in those cells either. Now I know there are a lot of people who have fat cells that look like those little teeny ones. Do you know how they do it? Well, think about it. If you reduce the amount of fat you eat, there will be less fat going in your cells. If you exercise properly, you'll burn the fat that is stored in those cells. Then they begin to deflate. It's just like letting air out of one of the balloons. So even though we can't change the number of fat cells we're born with, we can reduce the amount of fat that is stored in those cells. We do this for that special formula of healthy eating and exercise that women talk about all along. If you stick to eating low-fat foods and exercise like I told you to do, you can bet that those fat cells will shrink, and that's when you lose weight. You have to understand that not all fat is unhealthy. You need to have a certain amount of fat to help protect the organs in your body. The fat acts like a cushion to protect the organs from injury. But there are a few places you definitely don't want any fat, like around your heart muscle or clogging up your arteries. That's why you have to remain on a constant vigil to keep the fat out of your foods, so it stays out of your body. Fat cells thrive on the law of supply and demand. If you constantly supply your body with high amounts of fat, it will get used to having that fat and demand more. If you cut off the supply of fat to your body, that's when you'll see those fat cells begin to shrink. Now remember what I said, we're not talking about prison cells today. We're talking about fat cells. If you continue to feed your fat cells, you are creating a prison cell for yourself. You have to break out of this cell by breaking off your relationship with fat. Well, think of it this way. The next time you go to the park and you see a sign that says, "Please don't feed the animals. Remember, please, don't feed your fat cells."